Capital punishment has been in the penal codes of most, if not all, civilizations. What is the modern point of the death penalty? Retribution, deterrence, justice? Does it still have a place, and what is it? Has the method overtaken the point of capital punishment? Join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
Amnesty International has published its annual report on the use of the death penalty worldwide. According to the organization, the number of executions in 2023 reached its highest level in almost a decade, with a noticeable surge across the Middle East. A total of 1,153 executions were recorded in 2023, an increase of more than 30% compared to 2022. This is the highest figure recorded by Amnesty International since 2015, when 1,634 people were known to have been executed. Despite this increase, the overall number of countries where executions were carried out reached the lowest level ever recorded by the human rights group. The 5 countries that carried out the most executions in 2023 were China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, and the US. Iran alone carried out 74% of all recorded executions, while Saudi Arabia carried out 15%. More executions were carried out in Somalia and the US in 2023 than in the year before. In Iran, the authorities have intensified the use of the death penalty to instill fear among the population and tighten control over the authorities carrying out executions throughout the country. At least 853 people were killed, an increase of 48% compared to 576 in 2022. Due to state secrecy, Amnesty International's figures do not include the thousands of people who are believed to have been executed in China, which remains the world's leading executing country. Similarly, the organization was unable to provide figures for North Korea and Vietnam, countries that are believed to often resort to the death penalty. Despite the shortcomings of a few, the overall global progress has continued. Currently, 112 countries advocate for a total abolition of the death penalty, and a total of 144 have abolished the death penalty in law or practice. Executions were reported in 16 countries, the lowest ever recorded by Amnesty International. No executions were recorded in Belarus, Japan, Burma, and South Sudan, countries where the death penalty was carried out in 2022.
Our guest today is Professor Jarosław Utrat-Milecki, and he's the founder of the European Centre for Penological Studies here at the University of Warsaw. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
I'd like to start off with the Amnesty International report, and which seems to suggest that fewer countries are carrying out the capital punishment, but the number of capital punishment victims or accused is rising. Is that the broad finding of this particular report?
You know, for me, it's not shocking. It is like that, so that it's not that we have a diminishing of penalty. There is nothing shocking about it. So still there are countries where you have death penalty in law. Some of them, they execute this, some not. Like Belarus last year didn't do it, but we don't know if they continue to do it. So that's nothing shocking in this. So this is like that. So we still have countries which use death penalty.
Throughout history, most civilizations, countries, states, have had some sort of ultimate sanction. In Europe, has that diminished as a result of the Enlightenment thinking about, as we were talking earlier, the dignity of the individual? How can you defend the dignity of, say, a murderer?
The question of essence of human being. You have a person, a human being. He is a father, he is a son, he is a worker, and so on, and he is a murderer also. So that's act. So we condemned this act. We must react to this deed, to deprive someone of life. But this is what happened. We do certain things which are good or bad, but the problem is, this was Professor Mabot, a philosopher, said that the problem is that we can judge only these deeds in society, which were created in society. We cannot judge, ultimate, a human being. If you believe in God, the God may do it because he created it. If not, we didn't create it. So it's not our job to do it. So we are not allowed. So that's from philosophical point of view. So generally speaking, it is doubtful if this is a punishment at all. This is Professor Edmund Krzymuski, Kantian,
is he a philosopher
classic
or a penologist, this professor? Professor Szymowski is a
Professor
penologist?
Edmund Krzymuski was the representative of a classic school of criminal law at the beginning of 20th century. Yes, and one of the main and very conservative and classic, this is why I quoted, and he said, even if a state may kill somebody, it would be a kind of self-defense. It is not a punishment. And the question is if we really need it. And most people answer today, no, we don't need it. And we want to be in society where we do not need it. But we can deal with even such terrible situations in other ways. Do not use punishment. So it's about principle of society.
Is there an element not just of punishment to capital punishment, but of some kind of the alternatives to capital punishment, for example? Are they part of a rehabilitation program? If we believe in the dignity of the individual, we believe that the individual can atone for their crimes.
It is this belief, this is what of it in human rights, you have this right to hope, so that even if we incapacitate somebody who did terrible things and he is also probably dangerous, so the risk assessment is that this person may repeat it. And generally it was atrocious. So what we can do, we can eliminate this person so that this person is incapacitated. But still, we shouldn't take away hope. Hope that is not that this person is sure that this person come back to society to be free, but the hope. So that's this element. And so we should treat this person, even incapacitated, even in prison, as a human being, because it is human being. Even if this is terrible human being, we all are terrible. We have wars.
Yes.
We kills 100,000 of people for different reasons, and people quarrel who is right, who is wrong in different countries. I do not name, there were many wars in the last 20, 30 years. It's not only Ukraine today. There are many other examples. So so punishment is about our principles of society.
Are these Christian principles rooted in European tradition, history, or are they global principles?
No.
How do you...
No, I think that if you think about human rights, for instance, the Declaration of Human Rights, there were like Maritain, so there were Christian people involved, but there were Marxists, there were people from different religions, so that's universal, indeed. This is also influenced mostly by Catholics, by Christians, but also by other denominations and like people and Marxists and so on. So that's universal. So we can go different ways, not only through Rome, to the same conclusions about human dignity. So that's a principle. And this is also what John Paul II said, that it's his point of view on death penalty was that he couldn't exclude that if it's necessary. And it probably, maybe it was necessary in the history, so we had it. But it's better to live in society which doesn't need it. And he hoped that we are, in modern societies, in the situation we do not need it, so we shouldn't do it.
What are the alternatives to capital punishment? You said that if we live in a society that doesn't need capital punishment, but the crimes are still being committed, what are the modern alternatives to...
The prison. for those who deserve. So first of all, we should be aware that, for instance, in the history, there was a situation of a moral panic where we used, like in, for instance, Great Britain in 18th century, death penalty for nearly 150 different crimes, yes, including small thefts and so on. So now when we are talking, we do not even express it, but we think that death penalty should be for blood, especially for murder, what you quoted. But even today there is a problem of drug trafficking, which can be also threatened with death penalty and can be executed in certain countries. So that's a problem of death penalty. So that today, if we consider death penalty from moral point of view, people think about blood, about if murderer deserved this. So the alternative for this kind of crime is prison. In most situations, in the special cases, it will be even long prison. It's not only about incapacitation, because even if you prove the murderer would not commit again this, still we can feel the justice, that we must do something. Because if we grieve, if we were harmed, family, society, by this deed, how can we negotiate with this murderer if he does not suffer also? That was Nis Christi's idea, that this grievance, this pain we experienced because of this crime should be also felt by the criminal. So that's an argument of justice. So the prison may be justified. And then still this person is with us and we see it, and this person can experience it. If this person is annihilated, so this person disappear, that's like existential. We all disappear one day. So that's finished. So this is not punishment in a certain way. This Professor Krzymuski argument was that this is not punishment. We just eliminate enemies. So we kill sometimes enemies when this is necessary. We find it necessary. So we hope in moment when we caught a person, this person is arrested, this person cannot harm directly people in the same way they did it before. We do not need it. So we do not need punishment. That's John Paul II, but also many other people and arguments. So I think that this is the argument. And in European Union, when we have this day of abolition of punishment since, I think, 2008, it is not about some few degenerated murderers, killers, abusers, and so on. We do not concern them exactly. This is about principles of human dignity and principle of society, that we do not need this. We can live without it.
In Chinese culture or the Middle Eastern culture, that you have a different approach to...
I wouldn't try to say it's different. It's a very different political system. And I think that's, no, I wouldn't use this Orientalism, that they are so different. We did in our history in Europe many atrocities also, so I did it. I hope one day they can join also this path. So China, America, and so on. That's a political issue, and it's very complicated. So I didn't use argument that they are so different that they must have.
Yes, you can use that argument that the United States, for example, Anglo-Saxon culture is still executing prisoners or has prisoners on death row.
Yes, but if you think about the United States, in the majority of the states there is no death penalty, and death penalty is mostly executed in certain, not only in certain states, but even in certain counties. So that's very local culture. It is related also to certain processes in society. So it's a very complicated issue, and it's a trouble.
So what you've said so far seems to be that it's the political angle, the politicians that have intervened in this universal humanity, notion of humanity.
Yes, although I think that it's much more complicated because politicians are not so creators only they are also slaves of the structure of society. If they don't follow certain things, certain tendencies, they fail. They are not way. So it's a very complicated issue. This is like a political punitiveness and penal and this populist punitiveness and all this. When you are very fragile with the opinions, with the shock of, for instance, crime, because when we talk about crime, we do not talk about fact, which is neutral. It is not neutral. It is always something terrible. So there are emotions. But state and politics should be based not only on emotions, but on a rational thinking. We should, temper this. So that's a role. And sometimes politicians, because of the structure of system, even of the electoral system and so on, follow emotions.
Yes.
But emotions are not values. This is not the same.
A final question to you. We have this creeping anti-capital punishment thinking in Europe. How do you see the penological aspect of European thinking progressing? Can we speak of progression, or can we just seem to tinker around the edges of crime? We lock people up, we punish them by locking them up for long terms in prison. Are there any more enlightened remedies for the criminal act?
There are a lot, but the problem is that if you think about the most serious crimes, so probably in most cases prison for some time is necessary. In case of murder, it's a problem of justice. It's also a problem of incapacitation, and I think especially now there is a big research and a big movement concerning with the question of risk assessment. So the problem of the protection of society against violent crime. And here it's not even about justice, but about the protection of potential victims. And then prison is answer. Prison or sometimes special other kind of institution, but closed institution for rehabilitation, for psychiatric institution and so on. So we need it. And so here probably in certain cases we cannot avoid it. So that's accepted generally as a principle. But for instance, death penalty, we should be aware in Europe, in 1950, when we had European Convention on Human Rights, there was no statement about death penalty. It appeared at the level of European Convention in 1983 with the Protocol 6, when it was mentioned that the death penalty should be abolished, and it was abolished, but not all, not in time of war. So in time of war, it was abolished by the Protocol 13 from 2002, which entered into force in 2003. And by the way, Poland was the really last country from 45 countries which signed this in 2014. Now Armenia also joined this in 2023. But generally, this means that we excluded officially, according to this principle of human rights, now death penalty from Europe. The exception is, for instance, Belarus. But so all countries of Council of Europe, they signed agreement and ratified agreement that they do not use in any circumstances death penalty. That's a legal approach. That's an international approach. So this is our commitment to this interpretation of values. It was not from the beginning. In 1950, it was not so. We were not sure if we can afford it in our societies. Now we think we can and we should.
Professor Utrat Milecki, thank you very much for coming on to the program.
Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thanks. That's all we have time for today. Join us next time for How We Got Here.